Hi, it's Len Testa, and this is our first February show for 2015. And it's on a topic suggested by you, our listeners, the history of Disney's value resorts. Lots of great stuff here, including how the 1990-1991 Gulf War and underdevelopment on the Osceola County side of Disney property, and pressure from Osceola County government for tax revenue, led to Disney creating its all-star value resorts. Along the way, Jim talks about how Disney's menu of hotel amenities and price options developed, so it's a good overview of the entire history of Disney's lodging. In other news, we'll be releasing a new bonus episode directly to Bandcamp sometime this month, so be sure to check disneydish.bandcamp.com for updates. You can also get older episodes at disneydish.bandcamp.com with hours and hours of extra content. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a groundhog to avoid. Happy listening.
Welcome back to another edition of the Unofficial Guide Disney Dish Podcast with Jim Hill. It is our February show, and we're very excited on this one because it's a listener-inspired show. Many of you are planning trips to Walt Disney World for later this year, and one of the first questions you have to answer is which resort you're going to stay at. And of course, the Disney's Value Resorts are among its most popular. To give you the history of Disney's Value Resorts, we have with us today one Mr. Jim Hill. How's it going, Jim?
I'm doing well, Len, and you?
I am well. It's a beautiful spring day here in Greensboro, North Carolina.
You lie. It's February. It's
it's global warming.
Up here in New Hampshire, I just had to shoo a polar bear off of the front steps. All right? It's not fair. So.
All right. So, Jim, we have our listeners are obviously planning trips for Walt Disney World for later on this year. Many of them will be staying at one of Disney's value resorts. And one of the interesting things, you and I have talked about this before, is that Disney originally started off with value resorts, and we'll talk about the history of those. But it seems like even within the value category, they've got these three different tiers of value resorts. There's the original All-Star resorts, which are sort of like the least expensive of the value resorts. Then the Pop Century, which came later, and you'll talk about that, is its sort of middle tier. And then the new Art of Animation is sort of the deluxe value resort category, right?
And, what's kind of interesting about the Art of Animation is, look, one of the reasons Disney got into the family suites business is just off property. You have the Nickelodeon Hotel.
Oh, yeah. And they do killer business.
They do. But more to the point, they were the ones who proved that you could create, this. It's weird. People will actually go to Nickelodeon and stay there for the entire week. That it's a walled city because between the themed pool and the character dining, and they actually have the theater there that shows nothing but 3D movies. I mean, it's for kids of a certain age, it's an ideal resort. In fact, my only knock on Nick is that, to be honest, when you visit it these days, they haven't really kept up with the newer series. That you don't see, characters from the shows that are now on Nickelodeon. There.
Yeah, it's still SpongeBob and iCarly and things like that. Yeah, and those were classic series. Don't get me wrong, I love me some iCarly, but so what I think is really funny is right down the road. I mean, literally across the street from the Nick Hotel is this mammoth Marriott property. It's like, Marriott, World Conquest Resort or whatever they call it. Disney didn't bat an eye.
Right.
When Marriott puts up this 17,000, 150,000 acre, 70,000 room, thing, this monstrosity. Disney doesn't care at all, right? Nickelodeon puts up like a 400 room hotel with characters in a in a really great interactive pool. All of a sudden, it's like all the alarm bells are ringing, the airplanes are scrambling, and all of the architects are on call.
Well, and that brings me to kind of the theme of this podcast, that Disney doesn't operate in a vacuum. All right, whether I know there are Disney fans that kind of put the blinders on, and it's all about Disney, and how innovative they are. And the reality is that Disney is constantly paying attention to what's going on in the marketplace. More to the point, when things are built on property, they are built in specific locations for very specific reasons. I mean, take, for example, the first Moderate, the Caribbean Beach Resort, opened October of '88. the big selling point for that hotel when it opened was it was the closest hotel on property at Epcot. More to the point, it was going to be just down the street from the soon-to-open Disney MGM and Typhoon Lagoon. Jump ahead to Port Orleans, French Quarter. That one opens May of 91. Big selling point of that one is it was going to be connected by water taxi, so you had a direct shot to all of the new shopping and dining opportunities of the revamped,
Downtown Disney.
down to, the shopping village and the recently opened Pleasure Island. And, Coronado, just there, they had, at this point, they'd been in the moderate market. This opened in August of 97. They'd been in the moderate market for a while at that point, and they had heard from people who were renting at the hotels. It's like, look, we'd love to hold a convention at a Disney moderate, but you don't have any convention facilities. So,
Wow. And that's a really specific market, moderate priced convention facility. I mean,
but it's all about having a menu that that you can sit there and go, all right, and let's be honest, to have it positioned right across the street from Typhoon Lagoon and Winter Summerland. I mean, it was just sort of like, and again, let's remember that the other thing you could sell at that point was just down the road or over the hill was going to be where Animal Kingdom was being built.
Right. Yeah, because it opened in 98, right?
Yep. All right. Now, anyway, to talk about the value resorts, you've got to start with the All-Stars. And, again, these were built for two very specific reasons. One is that Disney wanted some low-cost, on-property hotel rooms that would then appeal to the Disney World guests who traditionally had been staying in Kissimmee down along 192 or out on I Drive.
Yeah.
More to the point, at around this same period, Disney was under increasing pressure from Osceola County officials because they owned all this property in Osceola County that they had not developed yet. And whereas Orange County had this, this great revenue stream coming off of Disney, Osceola County, because there was so little Disney operating in those areas, it was one of these things where it's like, where's our share of the pie?
Okay, so for our listeners, Disney World is so large, 28,000 acres, it actually straddles two counties in Central Florida, Osceola and Orange, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And the interesting thing about it is most of the development historically in Disney World has been on the Orange County side. This has been like, I guess if you were to draw a line, most of the stuff like Magic Kingdom, Epcot, Studios, and all of the resorts around those, that's all in Orange County, right?
Yep.
But Animal Kingdom is in Osceola.
Well, yeah, but even there's a chunk of back of a house of Animal Kingdom that's actually in Orange County. I mean, but again, that's a 400+ acre theme park, so it's I mean,
yeah, it's gonna go across lots of boundaries. So Osceola comes in. It's almost like a neighborhood protection racket. Like, nice theme park you got here. Yes, say the Osceola County Commissioners. Pity if anything should happen to it.
Yeah, well, which brings us to January 16th, 1990. All right, this
Eisner's the CEO.
Eisner's the CEO at this point, and it's actually a press event that starts on the 13th. It's the opening of the Swan, and Eisner, as part of the inaugural event held in the convention facility, the Swan and the Dolphin share, announces the Disney Decade.
Wow. I remember. This is how old I am. I remember him doing it.
Okay. So now think about this. Michael stands on stage and announces that within the next 10 years, you're going to have a fourth Disney theme park built and 29 new attractions along with 7 hotels.
Yeah. I mean, this is his Kennedy moonshot speech, right?
No, that's exactly.
No, dude, it totally is. Yeah, I'm not joking. It is.
No. Well, actually, it's also a cannon shot across Universal's bow because remember, this announcement is being made 6 months ahead of when Universal Studios Florida is going to open, and it's just 7 months after MGM Pleasure Island and Typhoon Lagoon open. So it's one of these things that sending a message to the folks at MCA. It's like, look, we're not kidding around. You're coming
Welcome to
here.
the big leagues, Rook.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
but just to review here, to go back over what they announced at the event, you had Wilderness Lodge, the lovely hotel we all enjoy today. But you also had a companion resort that was announced during the same period, the Wilderness Junction Resort. And this was not the villas. This was actually going to be sort of a town that sat out between Fort Wilderness, the campground, and Wilderness Lodge that was actually going to be connected by a steam train, 575 guest rooms there. Meanwhile, along a Seven Seas Lagoon, you were going to have the Mediterranean resort built, and this was 1,000 deluxe rooms and suites that were going to be. The theme was going to be the sunny resorts of the Greek islands, and also going to have a 65,000 square foot convention facility and a marina.
Wow.
And then on top of that, you had the Disney Kingdom Suites Hotel, and the gimmick of this hotel was it was 200 luxury suites. You had the Disney Boardwalk Resort, which was going to be an additional 530 rooms, and then 2 Hollywood-themed hotels of 1,000 rooms each. They never named these hotels, and they only the vaguest possible art made it out. And what's kind of interesting, of these 7 high-end hotels that were announced at the Disney Decade, only 2 were ever built, at the Wilderness Lodge and the Boardwalk. And that was because 7 months after Eisner makes this announcement, the Gulf War starts.
Yeah.
All right. And that drives up the price of oil worldwide, decreases consumer confidence, and starts a recession that runs through well into 92.
Yep.
And suddenly you're in the situation where money's a lot tighter, people are cutting back on their leisure travel, which, think about it. Here's the Walt Disney Company spending $3 billion building Euro Disney in some sugar beet fields outside of Paris. And, this isn't what you want to hear. It's like, hey, everybody's cutting back on travel. It's like, enjoy your resort. And so 6 months out from the April 1992 opening, Disney's getting the financial projections, and it's clear that Paris is going to be in trouble. In fact, but they had no clue how bad it was going to be. I mean, when the first fiscal year ended in September of 93, they were posting a $905 million loss. And
wow.
And just in another 30 days, it jumped to over $1 billion. So
wow, I mean, it's even big money today.
No, that's exactly. So Disney realizes immediately that this storm is coming, and they're going to have to make up the financial difference somewhere, which is why Disney stepped away from the plan of these 7 deluxe resorts, and in fact, only goes forward with the ones that have already begun construction, Wilderness Lodge, and they'd already begun site prep for Boardwalk. So those were the only 2 that made it out of the ground. And they then went with much safer bets. So, this is where you saw Disney, getting very aggressive, when they started Disney Vacation Club, what we now know is the old Key West Resort.
Right.
And in fact, it was at the press event for Old Key West that they were taking the press through in October of 91, when word leaked that Disney had plans for this complex of hotels that they were going to build in Osceola County, and at that time they were called Disney's All-Star Village.
Wow. All right, so it all started with the Gulf War,
right?
Which because it's convoluted, right? It took like 3 or 4 minutes to go through that history. So the Gulf War precipitates a cutback, an increase in oil prices,
right,
which causes consumers to travel less, which makes Disney put on hold their plans for their deluxe resorts, and in a scramble to make up revenue for falling prospects at Euro Disney, they look stateside and feel they need to cannibalize the value market at 192 on 192.
And
wow, that's awesome.
and what's fascinating is, as this word leaks, there are 2 reactions that come out of the Orlando area. First, you have Neil McFarland. He's the spokesman for Holiday Inns International. That time,
Holiday Inn?
Holiday Inns International in Orlando. At that time, they owned 13 Holiday Inns in Central Florida.
They're a British company, right? Or they were at the time, right?
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
And they were like they were optimistic. They were like, Disney's fourth theme park will create more demand. That's a bigger tourist pie, and more to the point, don't worry about it. These hotels are going to be phased in over a decade. That's a long time, and and that at that time the average hotel room out there was going for $55 a night.
Okay.
On the other hand,
going for $55 a night. Anyway, okay, that's foreshadowing. Go ahead.
Okay. Now, on the other hand, here you have Randy Larson, the owner of Larson's Lodge, Main Gate. Again, they're way the hell down in Kissimmee.
Yeah.
And all he could say is, when I heard that, all I can think is, that's scary. That's really scary. And Randy was the one who got it right.
Yeah.
Because again, the weird thing is they had, in '89, when MGM and Typhoon Lagoon and Pleasure Isle opened, it was a banner year. I mean, the Disney did well on property, but so did the folks who had hotels on 192, and so the guys out on iDrive.
You can tell. I mean, if our listeners that have driven up and down 192, you can see how many relatively large 300, 400, 500 room hotels and motels were on 192, and people built them because tourists stayed there, right? Yeah. And it was a time not too long ago, 10, 15 years ago, actually prior to 2001, where, Disney made the bulk of the money, but there was enough left over to support that infrastructure on 192, right?
And more to the point, back in the day when you had a Dick Nunis running the Walt Disney Company, this is a famous quote from Dick that, to the effect of, when he was getting pressure in the late 70s, early 80s to build more hotels on property, Dick flat out said, look, I want to be a good neighbor. And, just the notion is we make dollars upon dollars from everybody who comes on property. What's the problem with a couple of nickels rolling off the table to the people out on 192?
Yeah.
And it was the notion of let's support that. And Eisner, on the other hand, was just about, no, wait a minute, that's a revenue stream and that should stay on property. And so, so here we are the November of 1992, they break ground for the first two All-Stars. And kind of interesting, that they didn't automatically zero in on sports and music for the themes there. In fact, at one point, they were toying with a hotel that was going to be the All-Star Travel, with the notion, for example, you could stay in the Arizona wing, which would have, colorization and design that suggested the Grand Canyon, and they were going to have a Colorado River themed pool. Likewise, the California wing was going to have, the Hollywood sign on top of one building, and I think the food court was actually going to be themed around like Monterey Bay.
Really?
So,
and why? Yeah. So why didn't they do that?
Well, it was more about they wanted, again, this was being a hotel that was being produced on the cheap. I mean, it just that there's no polite way to say this. And so they wanted strong graphics. In fact, the hotel was designed, Disney wrote her in the design. It was designed by a company called Architecton, which is based out of Miami, but the graphic design for the hotels was done by a company called Communication Arts.
Okay.
And, part of the problem was that, when you did the 5,000 foot view of this property, it was going to be really confusing. I mean, think about it. You have 5,760 rooms, spread over a campus that involved 30 low-slung buildings, all of which, were that sort of T-shape that were arranged in different. And, think about it. You're the guest trying to find your room.
Yeah. Is this Nebraska? Is this Idaho? What?
That's it exactly. So it sort of devolved into, give us things that, that very distinct shapes that people are like, okay, I'm in the building with the giant baseball hats. I'm in the building with the giant, surfboard. I'm in the building with the basketball hoop.
Readily identifiable icons that even the most farsighted guest can pick out even at night or in the rain or whatever. That's really interesting. By the way, I just wanted to bring up a quick observation here. Does it seem like, remember when we were doing the 1964 World's Fair episode? And Disney's first idea for the Ford Pavilion was Tour of America. Let me ask you this question, Chip. Is Disney's default idea for everything Tour of America?
Well,
their first idea for everything.
It's funny you bring that up.
Circle Vision. I'm just saying,
because the new Soaring movie that's being prepared.
That's right. It is. Oh, I forgot about that. Oh, funny.
To be fair, that there are two films being prepped. You have the Soaring Around the World and Soaring Across America, but. Yeah. But yeah, what are you gonna do?
Anyway, so they're building these two all-star buildings, and they have to come up with these readily identifiable icons. And by the way, these are different. These buildings are architecturally different than Disney's other hotels in a couple of other ways. I mean, the Caribbean Beach has exterior rooms, but anyone that's ever looked at the different building designs knows there's 2 or 3 dozen different shaped buildings at Caribbean Beach. So whoever did the architecture for that really went out of their way to make sure it wasn't just a cookie cutter design. But here at the Valley Resorts, they are literally all 3-story T-shaped buildings with exterior doors, and the only thing that's different about them is the icons that are bolted on to the outside of them, right?
Yeah, and then when you factor in the rooms are 260 square feet, and 2 double beds, not queens, and again, Disney is quite insistent about there is only room for 4 people in each of these rooms. You can't get a cot. And but at the same time, some of it's really kind of innovative. I mean, for example, because the closets are small, the beds are a few inches higher, so you can slide your suitcases under them.
Yep.
And at the same time, it's the stuff that's on the outside of the building is kind of cool. I mean, just as in doing research for this thing, for example, the giant surfboards, they cost $70,000 a piece.
Whoa.
But at the same time, had to be able to withstand a 300-mile-an-hour hurricane wind.
Yeah, I mean they're substantial.
I've only just, over the last couple of months learned about this hurricane testing they do where, the whole notion of the way they test whether or not something works, and is properly anchored, on the off test site is they basically put a 2x4 in a cannon.
You've never seen these tests?
I just heard about this.
They're amazing. Yeah, I mean, have you seen the video where they shoot a 2x4 through a mobile home?
No.
It matters that the mobile side of a mobile home is essentially some sort of metal paper mache. I mean, the 2x4 goes right through like it's passing through Kleenex. That's the only way to describe it. But yeah, they'll load it up. I don't think they throw it at 300 miles an hour because I think the wood splitters. But they'll do it like at 120, 150, and 180, something like that, with a 2x4 to make sure that nothing moves. Yeah.
Wow. Well, speaking of hurricanes, that we have to, with the opening of the first All-Star or the first units of the All-Star, the Surf's Up building in April of '94, we have to turn our attention back out to 192. And in fact, the kind of and Alfred Wright, who was the head of the Hotel and Motel Association for Central Florida, was touring the buildings and sort of put out the word to everybody he was working with. It's like, look, you got to freshen up. You got to, you got to give guests a better price value if you're going to survive with what Disney's about to do. And the sad thing of it is
he knew something was coming, right?
But here's the thing that what they decided to do. This plan was actually formed back in 1990. That the belief was that the problem with 192, the way to combat Disney, was that they had to beautify. that they had to make it that much easier for people to find their hotel. Because again, you'd start down 192,
Right.
and you'd be using that map that you picked up at Stuckey's,
Oh,
and it's just.
I think I know where you're going with this. So go ahead, because if this is where it came from, I'll be really impressed. Go ahead.
But this is where they decided to do what they called the Beautification Project, where they took the 15-mile stretch of 192 and put markers.
Is that where that comes from?
This is where this comes from.
Oh, so if our listeners know this because they've driven 182. There's mile markers that tell you, like, it's mile marker 7, mile marker 8. They're huge signs on the side of 192. That's where it comes from.
Yeah, and
because there's like fancy planters and there's like palm trees and stuff around. That's their beautification project.
That was their beautiful plus. And what happened was that they increased the taxes, local tax, 4%, to garner a fund that was supposed to cost only $23 million, eventually cost $30 million, to get this beautification, this mile marker project in place. What they didn't count on is that as they were doing this, as they move up the highway, in fact, Juju Patel, the owner of the record Parkside Inns and Suites, said, look, they said the 192 beautification process would bring in business. In fact, the beautification process didn't bring business. It ruined the business. That during the road construction, he said, I had 57 rooms, but people couldn't get across the road because of it. I would be renting 1 or 2 rooms a night.
Wow.
3%
occupancy rate.
And then, and here's the irony. Okay, so you have those 3 hurricanes that came back to back to back in 2007, that fall, which decimated signage and, caused a lot of hotels to close, coupled with the fact that you had the All-Star coming online in addition to the Pop Century, in addition to, Art of Animation. And now, August of 2012, Sentinel begins to run this series of stories about how these very hotels that, so many tourists stayed in, down, along and it had their pick all the way down to Larson's Lodge and Kissimmee. This area is now, rife with abandoned buildings, sidewalks you can't walk on, coupled with transients and drug activity. And it's like people are actually now afraid to stay down in this part of Central Florida. And so God help them, they're at it again. That there's now a new project underway. And you have to appreciate that they're about to begin construction again, just as Disney is now starting work, finally has convinced people to come on board with Flamingo Crossing, which is now going to create another value category below the of on-property hotels, not owned by Disney.
Yeah, third-party value resorts. Yeah.
But, at the very time that, they really should be girding themselves to do battle with this new set of hotels that are further going to, be competition, they're doing it again. There's this plan in place now where they're actually going to take the 15 miles of 192 and divide it into 3 new zones. There's going to be Paradise 192, which is going to play up the fact that it's the part that's closest to Disney.
Okay, so like the Sherbeth Road entrance 192 around Formosa Gardens, somewhere in there.
Yeah, that's a 7-mile stretch. You've then got Entertainment 192. The whole notion is let's develop this to be, we'll have, in fact, this is the area where they're actually talking about bringing casino gambling into Orlando.
They're going to need to do something.
Yeah, and then finally the longest leg that they're going to call it Destination 192, and it's like, okay, let's just highlight our natural resources. This is where you can go down and do the airboat ride, or you can tour a cattle ranch, or that sort of thing. But
And that must be the west part of 192. The east must
Yeah.
be the other one. Because the east, don't they have those dinner shows and stuff on the east side of 192?
Well, yeah,
Oh,
this is the closest to Kissimmee, but it's home to about a dozen mom and pop hotels, strip malls, and
yeah.
a few attractions. I mean, this is down where Medieval Times and Capone's is, but at the same time, I mean, all the hotels that are down there right now, they're not hotels. I mean, these are places where actual Orlando area residents, they live long term there.
Yeah. For the unofficial guide, obviously, I stay at a number of offset hotels every year, and I mean, like, anywhere between 20 and 30 of them, and usually I concentrate on 192. The stuff on iDrive tends to be more convention traffic, and the stuff on iDrive has actually been maintained fairly well. I was actually at a La Quinta recently on iDrive that is nice by any standard. I mean, it's one of the nicest La Quintas I've been in. Clean, comfortable, everyone's super friendly. But man, the stuff on 192 is just gone downhill so fast. I was in one, and I won't mention the name of it, but it was farther down. It was on the west side of 192, down by where that big mega Target is.
Yep.
Down by there, and they give me this room, and it's in the very, very back of this. It's like a 300-room hotel. I am literally the only car on that side of the parking lot. And, there's grass growing up in the cracks in the asphalt. And I'm at the far, far, far end of the hotel, where I've got to walk, all the way down. Well, I mean, I'm driving, but, if I wanted to go to the lobby, I would have to walk literally the length of the property to get there. I'm like, well, what family is going to recommend this to their friends when they come back? It's never going to happen. Now, eventually, I mean, I checked in at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Eventually, there were a few other cars, here and there coming in, but it wasn't the kind of experience. It was dirt cheap, but it wasn't the kind of experience where you could say, that you're going to go back to your family and say, yeah, I spent $55 a night on a hotel or whatever it was, and it was a little bit of a drive to Disney, but all in all, I'd do it again. You would never do this again. There are so few hotels that I would recommend on 192. And one of them, by the way, is the Roadway Inn on 192, which I think is super clean. It's actually behind an Indian restaurant, so it's like you could walk out of the room, and it's clean, it's comfortable, it's safe. You can walk out of it, go get some naan and and some curry, and go back to your room. It's fantastic. But but the other stuff on 192. Did we talk about the time I'm pulling into it's a travel lodge, and I won't say we're on 192. As I'm pulling in, there's a guy climbing out of a dumpster as I'm pulling into the hotel. I'm like, it's gonna be one of those nights, man. It's gonna be one of those nights.
Wow.
Yeah. I will say the Super 8s on 192, especially the ones closest to Disney property, are some pretty good Super 8s. Free Wi-Fi, really inexpensive and simple continental breakfast, but great service, clean rooms, safe. Those are all fine. I really like the Super 8s, but man, the rest of them, especially the ones that aren't chains, God, I don't know how they're. The ones that aren't boarded up are. I don't know how they're surviving.
Well, a lot of them aren't, but again, that's the whole point of this new plan, to try to kickstart or save this.
They don't have They can't have any money to do that. They just can't. I mean,
well, not on the heels of what happened with the beautification thing, where in the process of trying to save the area, they killed a lot of the hotels, because again, it was just, remember how long this thing was in construction. I mean, it started early 90s, it didn't wrap till 2000.
Yeah, that's a long time. The only thing that might help them, and they've got a sliver of hope here, at least until the Flamingo Crossing stuff comes in, is that I was doing some research for the unofficial guide. And if you look at Disney's value resorts now, something like Pop Century, there are times during summer, even with a discount, where it's around $140 a night with tax.
Yeah.
And you can get rooms, on 192. And again, some of them are, they're motels. Let's be charitable here, but you can get them around $35 a night, $40 a night with tax.
And when you think about what it costs to go to Disney or eat at Disney or that sort of thing,
Yeah.
That's money you can actually apply on your vacation.
Yeah, saving $100 a night on lodging, especially if you're driving, and 3/4 of Disney World visitors do. $100 a night, over the course of 4 nights, $400. I mean, that's a ton of money to a lot of people, right? I mean, it's a ton of money.
No, absolutely. And then coupled with the fact that, again, I don't mean to talk badly of the All-Star hotels, because lots of people have stayed there and had good times and enjoyed their family vacations that they had that were based out of these places. But let's be honest, these each of the villages here it's 10 buildings, that are identical, the T-shaped buildings, that have 192 rooms.
Yep.
And the reason that they were designed the way they were designed is that, the notion is that each wing of one of these T-shaped buildings, all of the rooms can be cleaned by just 2 maids. Okay. So,
really, you just work your way down the rooms.
Yeah, just bang, 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 bang. And more to the point, even the construction of this thing was done at hyperspeed. I mean, for example, the construction technique, the way they did the concrete allowed them, they could do 18 different hotel units in a day. I mean, that they could just bang these things out.
Yeah.
But because of the way they're set up and because of their price point and because of the features that are offered, these tend to be the hotels that groups, particularly whether it's Pop Warner or cheerleaders or that sort of thing. And when you have groups that are that large, that they kind of sometimes forget themselves, and which is why this hotel can really be noisy sometimes.
They're kids, they run around, and especially the All-Star resorts, especially the sports resort, which number one attracts a lot of teams and cheerleader groups for competitions. But they've got those small play areas that look like football fields and that look like baseball fields and soccer fields, and kids will bring their Nerfs out there and play. I mean, whom among us hasn't done it?
No, absolutely. But it's one of these situations where it's 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and
during summer.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm not well enough versed with art of animation, which seems to be more of a family rather than a group resort. Though ironically, because of the whole family suite idea, they're constantly encouraging people to bring, do the family reunion there.
Yeah.
But Pop Century, to my knowledge, doesn't have that issue. That doesn't have the reputation.
No, there's a couple of things that are driving the noise level, or the sports groups at All Star. One is, like we said at the beginning of the show, it's the least expensive of the value resorts.
Mm-hmm.
All Star Movies, I think, maybe a little bit more, but like All Star Sports and All Star Music, those are the ones where it's relatively inexpensive too. I mean, animation, when you're looking at this family suites, you're talking about over $300 a night.
Yeah.
And that's stretching the definition of the word value.
Mm-hmm.
So you get a different. You're not going to get large groups of 30 staying there simply because of the price. It's too prohibitive, right? But the other thing is the way that the All-Stars are shaped. If you think about how the T-shaped buildings are oriented, between the way the pools are positioned and the way the playgrounds are positioned, essentially those buildings form an echo alleyway.
Yeah,
where noise just sort of echoes down them for a while. They are sort of noisy. That said, Laurel and I. There's no way to say this. Laurel and I fell in love with the All-Star resorts. We did this walk one night where we walked through all of them. There are some charming aspects to the All-Star resorts, especially All-Star Music. The area by where the cowboy theme stuff is. There's a little park. A picnic area right there. That's just lovely. If you look at the Broadway section at night, it is kind of cool. Right?
No doubt. I mean, I don't get me wrong. That the design there's a lot of clever stuff, and in fact, the fact that they've worked so hard to put the Disney characters in, whether it's the nephews on the football field or Sorcerer Mickey out in the pool, They tried. They made a legitimate effort. I don't know. I guess it'll be interesting to see what happens long range when the Flamingo Crossing hotels come online, and to see what the impact is on value.
The first of those, I know they announced them last year, 2014. I think the Marriott property, the Marriott group is doing the first set, right? That's like what's the Marriott budget brand? Courtyard.
Yes, there you go.
I think the Courtyard is supposed to be one of the first ones that they've announced. And when are they supposed to go live? Is it next year?
My understanding is 2015 the first, or supposed to be out of the gate. But again, remember, this is Florida, and you get a wet spring or a hurricane. Yeah, things can slide. But I don't know. Again, it's just that I guess again, what just kind of fascinates me about this is, particularly there with Flamingo being right up against the toll road. It's going to be interesting to see, does this in fact affect how people arrive at the resort? How they choose to come to Disney? Whether or not they'll take the toll road rather than be out on 4, because I think you've been probably watching the same stories I have this week, where they're talking about the new expansion,
the I-4 expansion. That's gonna go to like 2022.
Yeah.
Did you see the amount of work that's going to be on I-4? It's like 64 bridges, 190 something It's like 90 bridges, 64 intersections, like 12 pedestrian overpasses. I mean, it's just a massive undertaking. I think it's going to push people to the turnpike, especially, since they set up that Easy Pass thing or Sun Pass.
Yeah.
I have a Sun Pass, and I don't even live in Florida because it's so easy to take the toll roads, and it's just a little transponder I stuck up on the windshield of the car. It stays there, I think, for like a minimum of $10, and you can auto load it. It's like your Starbucks gift card. You can just it makes driving so much easier. I take the turnpike all over Florida. Actually, it's not bad at all. I think it's a good value.
No, I agree, and that coupled with the fact that there's no polite way of saying this, folks. I'm from New England, and I remember when the Big Dig was supposed to be done in just 7 years.
Is it still going on, the Big Dig? Is it done?
They're still fixing ceiling tiles, Len. It's like
2024. It should be done by then, right?
Yeah, so it's just this whole notion of 2022 we'll be done, and it's just sort of like so. Again, just to bring this full circle, that given that Flamingo Crossing just backs up right against the toll road. In fact, isn't the off ramp
goes right to it? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
it's another one of those, that's Disney using their leverage with the planning committee there.
Yeah. So it's just going to be fascinating to see the impact that has. But anyway, that's kind of a Reader's Digest version of the history of the values, and the fact that, again, it's who would think that building 5 overpriced hotels at Euro Disneyland, would result in building 5 value resorts at Walt Disney World. But that's actually what happened, folks.
That's amazing. I never would have put all that together. That was really great research there, Jim.
I live to please.
Thank you very much. All right, you've been listening to the Unofficial Guide to Disney Dish podcast with Jim Hill. Please go on to iTunes and rate our show. And again, since this was a listener-suggested topic, please let us know on iTunes what you'd like to hear in an upcoming episode. For Jim, this is Len. We will see you on the next show.
Take care, guys.